to order the meeting of the Management Subcommittee on Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. We are operating remotely in accordance with Governor Baker's modified version of the open meeting law. If everybody can mute themselves, if they're not talking, Bob. And we can go ahead and get started. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the March 10th, 2020 meeting. We have a motion to approve. First off, is anybody taking minutes? Did Rebecca send a template to anyone? She's usually good about that.
She did.
Oh,
does that mean I have to do it? She sent it to me and I think Adam, and I was like, oh, I hope Adam takes the minutes, but I guess I can do it. I just have to find it. So anyone else want to take the minutes? I'll share I'll do it. I'll do the minutes, but go ahead and I'll catch up in a moment with getting that document out.
So I will take a motion to approve Adam's minutes from last time.
So moved.
So moved by Scott Brown, second.
Second.
Second from Adam Young. Is there any discussion of the minutes? We were actually live the last time we did these, not that we're not live now. Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote for this. So Brown?
Brown, yes.
Dennis?
Well, Dennis abstains.
Ember?
Ember abstains.
Lavoy?
Lavoy abstains.
Young?
Young, yes.
Smith?
Smith, yes.
And Mills, yes. So those are approved. Next item on the agenda is subcommittee reports. So the purpose of this is not to have a mini school committee meeting, but because we did enough of that last night, but just to know what's coming in future meetings and what your plans are and things we should be aware of for the full committee. So Scott, do you have anything from legal? I'm just looking at my order of.
Jeff just sent out a email to myself and I believe Matt. We have two bargaining units coming up with dates for the virtual bargaining. So.
Okay.
And we had a meeting last week, and I don't know if anybody went over that last night's meeting, but we had Naomi on and went over a lot of material. So.
Okay, but we're probably not close to approving anything.
No. I mean, for the three bargaining units, we haven't really sat down with them yet, and we went over the MOA for the paraprofessionals, and also looked at dates for bargaining. So we have two of the three started.
And as we're being careful with Daryl sharing the MOAs with legal, and as we draft MOAs, they should all come to the school committee for approval. Yeah, as we did last night for the para one. We didn't do the WRA one last night because it wasn't. I think Daryl wanted it voted on first, but
right,
they should come to school committee.
And that's why I wanted to talk to you, Bob, because I thought I was going to make the meeting. Something came up last minute, and so I wanted you to handle the paras, the MLA. So that I'm assuming that passed.
It did.
Good.
Yes, it did.
And so we have the teachers that we have to bring to the full committee?
Yes, that didn't come last night.
Okay.
All right, Bob, how about education?
So we have a meeting on Tuesday, and there'll be a review of budget-related matters, an update on issues related to online learning, and then we're going to get into the weeds of that in some future meetings. Class size policy, we're going to take a quick look at, and also we want to keep coming back to the district learning quality indicator. The district quality indicators. And I don't know if Daryl is here, but we really are looking to move forward on that. I noticed it was in your agenda from your last meeting that I was not at, so I'm not sure where that discussion went, but the district really does need to come up with 25 or 30 things that they're looking at that seem to be some true sense of quality. So, and I know there's a lot else going on, but still, this is a long time in coming.
All right, Mike, I'm going to save you for last. Matt, do you have anything?
I think for a full school committee, Ken, the things that we need to be cognizant about for the agenda is on the June 8th agenda, giving the subcommittee the opportunity to present the electronic evaluation tool to the full school committee.
Mhm.
So making sure that we have some time to do that. I would anticipate it's not going to be a tremendous amount of time, but I think we schedule that where we get the most attention of the school committee, because Rebecca's going to get the evaluation tool out shortly thereafter. And then I think it's at the 6:30, the June 30th full school committee is where we will hopefully have the vote on the composite evaluation that you would put together. So though there are a number of steps in between that the subcommittee would take to get to that point, but I think that's where we need to be.
Right, and everyone will have given their input before then, although it's possible that Matt's, let's give Matt a second to come back. It's that darn button that's right next to the hang up button. The mute button is sneaky that way. Because I did have a question for him. Adam, do you want to continue on in the meantime?
Sure. For facilities and security, we haven't had much meeting since all this started, but we are planning to have a meeting probably in about 2 weeks, just to start laying out the topics and timeline of what we need to look at over the summer as we look at reopening and how that affects facilities and security. And then also start, while we have downtime really for this subcommittee, take a look at some of the old policies that we have sitting out there that relate to facilities and security that haven't been touched in over 10 years. So take a quick look at those as well and start coming up with a plan.
So Matt, we'll record number 1. I'm sure I'll be number 2 of the person who pushes the off button right instead of the mute.
I do every time, Ken. It's in the middle. I have to give that feedback to Google Meets. It's in the worst location ever.
I completely agree. Now, the vote for the final draft, of course, will then happen after the new committee is seated, right? Which, I mean, everybody will have made their contribution, but that date will be after, theoretically, after town elections, right? The June 30.
It will be, unless we want to think about pushing that timeline up or having a different school committee meeting, or, that's what we're looking at. But the hope is that everybody would be able to contribute to it.
Right.
So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's fine. I mean, I think it's just, I just wanted to draw it to people's attention. Because everybody, as you say, will have made the contribution. It just might be some new members can abstain or whatever they want to do when we actually vote on it.
Correct.
In terms of the ad hoc subcommittee, I realized we voted on the contract last night, but we didn't actually discuss the job description when we did that. The job description is not actually referenced in the contract, so I do think we can probably do that separately as a separate vote. But I did just want to be full disclosure, realize that we, whomever, all of us, didn't discuss the job description last night when we talked about the contract. So we'll have to bring that back, that part of it back separately in future meetings. Mike.
Ken, before we go to
Sure,
Mike, can I just ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
About just for the minutes, because I pulled the document up as we were starting the meeting. What time did you call to order?
7:03.
Okay, I thought it was that. And then for the minutes, when we were approving, we had some members that abstained. I think it was member Dennis and Imber maybe abstained. And did Lavoy, Matt, did you abstain as well?
I did. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure. And then everyone else was good, or did I miss anyone?
I think everyone
Okay.
gave this. Thank
All
you.
right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Sure. So, Mike, in terms of business and finance,
Yeah, so I got a note from Dan late yesterday saying, how about a meeting on Tuesday? I'm not available on Tuesday, so we scheduled the next meeting for Wednesday. And I presume if he suggested that we meet, that they'll have something new for us to talk about.
good. Daryl, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So just to reiterate, I think what Mike said, we will have more details associated with kind of plan of action. We looked through some of the comments from last night. Today, we kind of have a list of action items that we're working on that will hopefully kind of allow us to have a more clear picture for everyone of what the process might be moving forward and some of the different options we will have.
Okay, and I'll use some of Mike's language. We'll have to have granularity to address the valves, right? All three of the valves, so that we can start helping you craft some decisions. Some of the decisions are ones that are school committee decisions based on, do we need to come up with a new budget before the town meetings? It's been both Naomi, when I talked to Naomi today, as well as the meetings that we've been, that what the information Dan shared us is that if we need to reduce the budget, we don't need to give 45 days notice, that a reduced budget can be submitted to the towns in a smaller amount of time, if that's what we're choosing to do or not. But we would need, granular detail from the administration, as well as direction about what they want, right? Or what their stake is, if we're going to make that. And we would really probably have to do that by our next full school committee meeting, right? To give towns time to digest it. Sheila's question last night, I think, is a fair question, right? Even if the answer is no. Because the towns do have to plan their budgets, right? And they're going to do their best to plan their budget. And if they don't kind of know what we're intending, it does make it sort of hard for them to plan themselves, right? Even if we're going to say, we'll just do 1/12, we'll figure it out when we have more information, which isn't a bad answer. We should, make sure the towns know that's our intention, if it's indeed the intention, so they can plan accordingly. Okay, so looking at the rest of our agenda, what I wanted to do was I want to talk a bit about the COVID plans and what your plans are for, actual having beginning to think about what a plan would be of what next year would look like. I know there's too many variables to say my plan is this, but just to talk about, what is your plan to make a plan. I want to talk about the SOA because we do need to at least keep that on our agenda. Talk about advocacy. I do have a suggestion for advocacy. It's not compelling, but a suggestion. And then in executive session, I want to talk about, contract negotiations and what options we have for that. So does anybody else have anything on subcommittees before we move on? All right, so the next item is COVID-19 school closures, next steps and plans. Obviously, the next steps are, finishing up this school year. I don't think we need to get into the granularity about how kids get stuff back. That's your problem, Daryl. It's your problem. But
Right.
ESY and what your plan is for thinking about next year. I mean, I often hear, well, the DESC will say whatever. They won't. Right. I mean, at some point the governor will give some guidance, but it'll be late in the game and too late to really plan. So I do think that we need to talk about how you're going to tabletop through contingency plans, be it from everything's fine, but we have to be separated. That's a fantasy, right? But that plan to some mixture of half the kids are in school half the time, the other half the other time, which seems likely, to totally online, whatever your contingencies are. I think we want to start talking through, like, how are you going to build XYZ contingency plans, and what are the dates where you think you might reveal some of those contingency plans? Because it's not just you, right? It's not just us, it's all of your bargaining units, it's the parents and whatnot, and what your thinking is about how you're going to plan to plan.
So that's I think the $64,000 question, the plan to plan. So, it's so interesting because even this evening I got into Google. I was there early and I was waiting to click on and I couldn't click on. So, Rebecca's been texting me to send me a new link, but technology, again, this is one of the issues that I think many people have been dealing with it. You have the in and out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So, in terms of, looking ahead, so we have a couple different things that we're, looking at right now. So Ken, you did mention the granularity associated with end of the year activities, as well as, how we're going to allow kids to come back to school, get their stuff. Again, they won't be cleaning out their desks, they won't be cleaning out their lockers, but we are planning that out, and we've been talking about that now for probably about 2 weeks with building principals. So I think some of the guidance that the governor put out yesterday, it's somewhat helpful, but not necessarily for schools. So we are kind of, floating a little bit there. And I know you did mention this, Ken. We wait for guidance from DESE. DESE oftentimes does say to us, to superintendent, that more guidance will be coming. Please hold off. Please don't do anything yet, because they're concerned that some people will jump the gun, and then they're going to have many different types of things going on, which is what happened prior to the remote learning plans being put in place, because it took them such a long time to do that. So one of the things that I've done, I talked about this last night, was I'm putting together a committee, having Director Keenan head a committee, and it's the Reopening Health and Safety Advisory Task Force. And it's basically going to be there to develop a set of recommendations for the fall, what 2020 school reopening might look like. And, we're focusing on not only, how it might look, but also we're going to focus on student health, emotional, and academic domains, the areas that we're focusing on with our strategic plan. We're going to review all the available state and federal guidance that's been put out there, and it will continually be put out there. We're going to get some, stakeholder feedback about what people feel is really necessary, and then really contingency plans around reopening schools. And you said that, Ken. What happens if it's a half day? What happens if it's 1 week on, 1 week off? What happens if we have to have multiple runs for buses because we can't have 72 kids on a bus at the same time? So that group will be meeting, probably, by last week of May 27th. We have, a plan of action that's probably going to bring us out into the end of June, where we'll kind of wrap up the task force for, the first part of it, and then they're going to continue through the summer and into the fall. So what that will do is give us the opportunity to have a working group, and this group will include faculty, parents. We're looking at some medical professionals, our school nurses, some school committee members, administrative staff from central office, and also from buildings, and try to get a couple students from the high school as well, which is always good to get the student perspectives. So that's going to be really the group that helps guide us and advise us about next steps moving forward, because again, we don't want to do this in a vacuum. We want to do it with a lot of clarity, and we want to do it in a way that allows people to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And I think having many different people together from various backgrounds will be will really complement the entire procedure that, as we go through this. So that's kind of the big overarching focal point that we're going to be dealing with in terms of opening school in the fall. You did mention, Ken, there's extended school year, ESY. We are planning right now, unless guidance comes from DESE that changes their mind. We are planning to do it remotely, until we're told otherwise. So how that kind of plays out is something that we're working on with, our special ed staff. I know Christine is working diligently trying to pull that together in a way that is meaningful to students. Nothing replaces the true face-to-face. Nothing replaces being in a classroom with a student and a teacher. So that's a challenge. That's definitely a challenge. And then when we're looking at big picture items, moving forward, there are many other things that we're thinking about in terms of curriculum, in terms of how we're going to manage after school activities, how we're going to manage transportation, cafeteria, all of those items. So those are we have a kind of a running list of all the different things that we're looking at collectively around the opening of school and so forth. In terms of some of the items that we started talking about last night in reference to the budget and where we might be. I know the House just put out a proposed, basically, I think $1 trillion budget for, or not budget, but another round of funds for COVID-19 support, and quite a bit of that money was slated to go, or is slated to go, to local municipalities as well as states. How that kind of plays out, I think, is going to be a challenge, because I don't necessarily think, on the other side of the aisle, the Republicans want to jump into this too quickly in terms of putting more money out there to incur even more of a debt. So I think that's going to play a role in kind of how this whole budget process plays out. Again, I have a meeting with MASS, so my superintendent's group, and MASBA, which is the business administrators group, with DESE and the commissioner on Thursday morning. And we're probably going to be going through a number of details associated with ending the school year and how end of the year funds need to be calculated, and what can be done about carrying funds over from 20 to 21, because we're all in a very similar situation from district to district. So that's kind of a brief overview of that in terms of where we're at with the granularity side of what we're doing to kind of end of the year. Some of the ESY stuff that is taking shape right now, and moving forward, what we're doing around, again, trying to be a little more proactive than the state right now, having some options, and using that advisory group to help guide us moving into the fall.
All right, so I have Mike and then Matt.
Thank you. So going back, I think, to Ken's original question, so is it so the advisory group, and it sounds like that's still in its infancy, formative stages. The intention of this group is to develop parameters under which students might be able to return to campus. Is that right?
Right. So what it will,
you said to the essence.
Yeah, so it's basically to look at what might happen in terms of some of the opportunities and options that we have available to us as we bring students back into the school, because again, nothing has been defined. Nothing probably will be defined for several weeks, if not for a few months. So what we're trying to do is project out what we might end up having to deal with, how it might work in our district with so many different schools and grade level configurations and so forth.
Yeah, understanding that, I think you referred to this group as more advisory in nature. Nonetheless, it seems like a tremendous amount of responsibility for Director Keenan. What kind of supports do you plan to have in place for him?
So what will happen with Brendan, and again, Brendan has an extremely solid background in terms of working with groups of, large groups of people, and he's very qualified to kind of go through this process. The support that he will have will be from, central office, me, Bob, Jeff and Dan, if necessary, building principals, because again, we have, we're in constant communication with, our building principals and our other support staff. So I think that's going to be the most logical way to do it.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt that he's certainly capable of working with large groups of people. But it strikes me that the weight of these recommendations are things that are far-reaching and probably reach and touch on just about every aspect of the administration, from the logistical to the health to the teaching, just about every aspect one can imagine when we talk about the parameters of bringing students back. And so it's good to hear that you'll make every resource available to him and to the committee in that endeavor, because I think he'll need it. The second question that I had was, surely there have been schools, not just on the West Coast or in the mountain time locations, but also on the East Coast, who have at least talked about different models. Are there any models that you've heard about that you think could be worth investigating and could potentially fit well for Wachusett?
So when we've looked at, and again, what I've done is I've read some different articles that have been out there, looking at what some of the other places are doing around the country in terms of what they're looking at. Again, it's a little more challenging because for some of the districts that I'm reading about, it involves supporting a great deal of funding for like summer school in the summer. So it's a little more challenging. We're not at that level where we have state funds or federal funds to help support us in that. But if we were to do something where we were to, again, one might take a look at the model where we have students in for half a day and then out for half a day. So it's almost a part live. So they're live, but then they're also online. So there's a virtual aspect of it, but there's also an in-class aspect of it. So what we're going to have to do is follow the guidelines associated with social distancing. I'm seeing that, I believe, over in Denmark, where the classrooms are, and I've seen pictures of classrooms where they're 6 feet apart, and they've cut down the number of students in the classroom basically by half. So it becomes a little more of a challenge in terms of how we might work that out. Director Dede and I talked about the concept of buses and what we might need to do if we're running extra buses. We own the buses for the day. Do we have to pay for those? I'm saying no. I'm saying if we own the bus for the day, we have to do a second run to pick up kids in the afternoon, the same way that we did with kindergarten. That's how it works. But that would be one way in which I think it could work in our district, just because of the size and because we have the capacity to add buses in the middle of the day.
Member Lavoie, do you have?
Yeah, I appreciate those answers. I think you covered part of what I was going to ask. I did have a concern regarding a couple of things. One being, I understand the task that Brendan is taking on and that huge responsibility because it touches everywhere. One of the concerns that I have is if the output's going to be advisory, how is that going to align with a budget that is essentially probably already going to be in place? So I want us to think about that advisory is also probably going to be dictated by a budget.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying with that. Again, when we look at this and we have to make decisions about what might happen moving forward, what I'm trying to do is get as many kind of minds on a Google Meet or a Zoom meeting as possible to talk through the variety of situations that I know are going to come up. Again, we're looking to try to open up safely. How do we do that in a way that it protects our teachers, it protects our staff, it protects our kids. So how do we utilize PPE what happens with front offices and so forth. So all of those things are there, Matt. I think you are right. The budget will dictate many different things that kind of go on, in reference to anything that we do, moving forward, as it always does. But I think we're going to have to look at how we can, try to manage to put some money aside for some of these items. We've talked about the $150,000 that we have from the first round of the COVID-19 funds, which is, and again, that's an estimate right now, the 150. But those funds can be used directly for support around PPE and, getting kids back into schools. So that could be just a quick revenue stream that we can tap into to help deal with some of those items as well.
I'm glad you said that, because that bleeds into kind of my second point, which, and I'm glad you mentioned safety of teachers. I think that's probably one of the first things that we have to look at from a configuration perspective. They're the leaders of our kids, our classrooms. And I would challenge a little bit on the comment on extended school year to perhaps utilize that as an opportunity if you feel that safety needs are met, if you feel that restrictions have been lifted. Extended school year typically doesn't begin till July in this district. And you have how many buildings and how many buildings are currently being used or have been used in extended school year. You could really perhaps use it as an opportunity to test out some of that social distancing. Now, I think there's a lot that has to happen to get to that point, but that might be easier to implement and define a strategy than having a full steam of children in the fall. But again, it's all about the safety. And I think that's something that if you can take advantage of that $150K, start with, solid PPE for people and get that established, that's going to help perhaps build that foundation of recommendations.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Matt, we actually we've kind of talked about what that might look like. So if something does, if it could, because again, we can't just say we're going to bring kids in right now. We do have to wait for the governor to kind of go on to one of his next phases. And again, that has been a conversation point for us around, okay, it's actually the perfect timing. It's small groups. It allows us to kind of see how we would manage bringing kids in and out of the buildings and so forth. So it's definitely on the radar, which is one of the reasons why when I say, we're planning virtually for right now, I'm not sure, how it might look once they, maybe take the step and say, okay, you know what, we're going to open up, we're going to allow, schools to run summer school in July and August. Then I think we can jump in.
Now I'm just going to leave it kind of with a what is, and I don't expect an answer now, but what is the approach to be able to determine what teacher safety looks like from a PPE perspective? Because I don't know if we're ever going to get guidelines on that. I think there's a lot of input that we'd want to ask from teachers, from the assistants, from the people that actually are going to be the ones managing in a situation of people going back. What does safety mean for that?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's one of the things, as I've been looking at, and again, there's an awful lot of literature coming out on this right now, and how safety precautions are being taken in the same way, teachers and students. One of the issues that has been brought to, I think, some people's attention is the fact that basically a third of the teacher population is 55 and over in our country, and they fall into, it's usually 60 or over, but that category is, it's an age level where, people are a little more susceptible to, having COVID-19 in a manner that can be a little more detrimental to their health. So, kids are carriers. We're seeing that. We're seeing that, some kids are definitely getting ill. They're usually pretty immunocompromised to begin with, or have other health factors behind it. But kids do carry, and that's one of the things we're going to have to think about. With everything from playgrounds to desks to chairs to bathrooms to buses, it's really across the board.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll turn back to Mike in a second. I just want to emphasize when we talk about teachers, it's important. We don't want to ignore the other staff too, you know, nurses, custodians, they're all in high contact, right, with the kids in the building. You know, anyhow, Mike.
Bus drivers.
Yes.
Thanks. You know, the other thing, and it's a suggestion. I'm not sure how helpful it is. Theoretically, I think it would be, but perhaps the school committee ought to put together an ad hoc committee that is tracking the efforts of you know, how we the information that's emerging, the process that's unfolding, the recommendations that are coming out, you know, the decision and what it looks like to open for next year is so large and so far-reaching that it seems to me that we ought to have some folks from school committee who are dedicated towards tracking this and reporting back to the committee.
Yeah, I think that at the very least, school committee member or two should be on this committee, right? Whether it's an ad, and then we can also probably use this committee as well to be keeping track of that, since we're, in my mind, kind of the process committee. But if you don't mind, just I'm only throwing this out there as an example to talk about how it affects other people. But like I've saw in some country where they did this idea of, you know, one group of kids goes to school one week, the other group of kids goes to school the other week, and then they're online the opposite week. That kind of model, or whatever sort of model we wind up having if we do, affects your teachers union in a huge way of thinking about how they work, how much they work. Should they be like with the one teacher that's like doing just the in-campus kids, the other teacher doing the remote kids? I mean, who knows what the answer is? But I hope that when you pull this committee together, which you would do soon, that, you know, WREA is like appointing members to it, and that you know, they're proactively involved in those conversations, because anything that we do that isn't just, oh, we're back, is going to have some alteration in work conditions, and it's good if they're on board from day one in the conversations, and not like, oh, here's this advice, now let's get the union's, you know, input into it. So it's a collaborative discussion.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and I believe Heidi's already talking with or has reached out to her e-group, I believe. So, and maybe her negotiations group.
Yes, we did get invited today, Ken, to be part of that. So we're working on finding appropriate candidates who might want to be part of that discussion. Thank you for keeping us in mind.
No, and again, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Ken, that this process has to be something that is discussed from the start. We were thrown into this current situation, so we didn't have the opportunity to really sit down and kind of plan out what everything might look like before we shut down and went into a mode of remote learning. And this is a little different. We have the opportunity to plan out. We have the opportunity to think about what's going to be best for kids, for staff, for families. You know, again, the 1 week on, the one week off, anything that happens where kids are going to be part remote, part home, the number one issue that we're going to have is that families are going to be going back to school. Daycare is going to be an issue. I'm concerned with kids being at home by themselves if families have to still go to work and they're not working remotely yet. So there are many different issues that are going to come up with this that, you know, will require, you know, our oversight and, you know, our input as to what direction we want to go in.
Yeah, and it will require a lot of oversight and planning, as you say. And like in that, again, this isn't the model, it's just a model. That's when where you have to say, okay, I've got a high school kid, a middle school kid, and an elementary school kid. If we're doing one off, one on, you got to make sure all three kids are in the same cycle, right? Because the older kids probably take care of the younger kids when they're home. So it would be a lot. Whatever you do, some kid's going to be remote. Some teacher's going to be remote, right? Because they could be exposed or what have you, needing to quarantine. So there's going to have to be planning for mixed models, whatever those are. But I'm glad to hear that you're having a committee. I hope you stand it up as soon as possible, because you want to make sure, you know, the teachers have a sense, and not everyone, but particularly teachers have a sense of what they could possibly expect, because you the more time people have to plan, there's going to be the unexpected, right? But the more planning time there is, the more easy it will be the less hard it will be to adapt.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you mention when this advisory group is going to be formed and have their first meeting? Because I do believe we only have really 2 months to go on this, so it doesn't give us a lot.
No, so it's going to be, again, we're hoping to start on the 26th or the 27th. We want to give people some time. Again, Brendan wants to organize this. We want to make sure that we're scheduling, far ahead enough in terms of giving people the opportunity to actually be able to participate in this. And then the meetings follow. It's basically almost a meeting a week or a meeting every other week through July. And then this stays together through the fall, or through the summer into the fall. Because again, one of the things I want to ensure that we're doing is we have this active group who's continually kind of processing and thinking about what's going on and looking at what's happening in other places and how we might incorporate it into our district. And again, this is going to be a collaborative effort across the board because if there are items that we need to impact bargain, which we will probably have to impact bargain several of the different things that are going to go on, we're going to have to do that.
Okay. Now, and Brandon reports directly to you on this, right, Daryl?
Yes, he does. So Brandon is right in the superintendent's office. He's probably 40 feet from my door. So we work together very closely, and he is in my office, or I'm in his office several times a day.
Okay, because I know this is a giant undertaking. I kind of wish you were handling this, but if you believe that Brandon should handle it and report directly to you, and then this advisory group, I'm assuming, will come to the management group or the full committee and present what they believe we should do, the scenarios.
Yeah. So what'll happen is what we need to do is we need to ensure that we are looking at every possible option available. Again, what I'm trying to do is I don't want to spread myself so thin that I can't focus on several of the other, everything else that I'm trying to do right now. So, and on top of it, having Brendan facilitate this is something that I think will really allow people. He's, when I look at what we're going to be doing and how this is going to work, this is going to be something that, again, we'll get more guidance from Desi, but I really want to be out ahead of it. So he and I met today. We meet every day, no matter what, and we kind of go through what some of the different things are that we're doing. But I have full faith that he's going to be able to work through this, and I'm right there with him no matter what anyway.
Yeah, I guess I want to emphasize Member Brown's point, and it seems to me that the two biggest items that are in front of the superintendent between now and the opening of schools is the budget and the conditions under which we have students return to school, and anything else is a far third. And so I do have concerns, quite frankly, around having the sub-director lead the charge on this. So if you do in fact move forward in that direction, I do think that you should intend to put your full force and weight and attention behind those activities.
Yes. Yep. We're already on it.
All right. So I had Christina, and then Heidi was going to had a comment, and then Bob, you unmuted, so I'm taking that as you wish to say something, so we can go in that order. Christina?
Okay. Thank you. So as we're talking about opening the school for the fall, I'm thinking about, in part of these contingency plans, that of course the planners will need to plan for another closure like what we're having now, in case we get into a point where we have to, the governor closes the schools again, if we get into another time where the virus is going to have a surge. I also think if that's going to happen, that probably from all the comments last night, what we have now in place is working for some people and not all, that this model will need to be refined a little bit. So this is kind of, to me, the model that we're working under, the kids are learning under right now. I need some refining, but is there on the shelf or in case we need to pull it out, in case the schools need to be closed again. And I do agree, Ken, with what you said. It's all of the individuals in the school, and as everyone said, are affected by this. One of my main concerns that I'm sure the task force will address, being someone who works in a school, is there's little access to water to wash hands. I'm also thinking about, I'm sure this is part of the task force will talk about this as well, and is part of, I know business and finance was concerned about this too, is the cost of the, what Member Lavoie mentioned before, the PPE for teachers. We certainly can't have that on the backs of our teachers to prepare themselves in that way. Like, we need to provide materials for them. And I'm also concerned too about the teachers who are in high risk categories and how we protect them. And I've heard others say that as well. How do we protect them so that they are not exposed, or I guess just so they're not exposed. So just keeping in mind all of the individuals that work in our buildings, their safety, our kids' safety. School's going to obviously look different than it has looked, and hopefully we'll get through this in a year or so, and that's all. Thank you.
All right, Heidi, did you want to add something, and then I'll turn to Member Ember?
Yeah, I actually put what I was thinking in the chat. I'm sorry, I forgot you guys had a hand raise thing, but you know, I think the more transparent we can be about what the expectations are going to be, to your point, Member Christina, about how learning might need to be somewhat, whatever, looks somewhat different from this. I mean, I think a lot of people are just trying to get through to the end of the year, but I think if they anticipated a hybrid model or needing to be back and forth between them for potentially several years, it might cause people to reconsider. It's part of our thinking in terms of the finances, because those of you who are teachers who understand the way retirement is based on your age and your years of service, but your highest earning years as well, know that if we take COLAs and we take money back from members, some of them, it will impact their retirement calculations, and they'll actually work longer trying to recoup that money. So it's one of the things we're being thoughtful about. But yeah, it's worth thinking about putting that out there and having an incentive at the same time to see if people who really don't want to have to cope with that might decide they'd rather retire. Because God knows I would if I could.
I mean, I don't say this to the end of your statement, but I think it's really unavoidable that we can't do anything but expect there's going to be some hybrid next year.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It's not going to go away.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised how many people are somewhat reluctant to look at the reality that lies ahead of us. And you know, I agree with, we're going to probably have shutdowns as well. I don't think even the hybrid model is going to tolerate a big surge. We're going to have to be shut down completely. And so people need to think that through.
Member Ember, did you have something you wanted to add? I'm sorry, I muted you, Bob. Can you unmute? Okay.
You wish you could do that all the time. This is handy, huh? So I just, the task is so monumental, and I'm just a little worried about the timeline, Daryl, in terms of that meeting starting in 2 weeks, and then meeting on a weekly basis. And Brendan's certainly going to need secretarial support and things like that. So I just have real concerns because of the number of issues and all of the things that are going to be impacted and have to be planned for. And some of those earlier than others, at least in terms of securing the PPE stuff. And it's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And I can tell you we're already looking at how custodians can come back into the buildings. I have had a couple districts throughout the Commonwealth start this process slowly, but we have PPE coming in. Some actually came in today in terms of masks. Again, we're going to take every step possible to ensure that all staff are protected. Kids are protected. It's just we're looking at this, and again, I understand some of the concerns around the time frame for this, but we're still we're still looking at this in a way that we want to ensure that we do it correctly. There is some of the stuff's time sensitive, some of it is based upon we don't even know what what information is out there yet in terms of making a plan associated with this. So a lot of it will be theoretical. A lot of it will be projecting out. And then I think once we get more details around what will be allowed in terms of students coming back into school, and I agree with Heidi and also Ken, I believe, or Christina, the fact that there will be, there most likely will be times when we're going to have to do remote learning again for a month or two or maybe 3, I don't know, in the middle of the school year because of an outbreak. And I think once that starts to happen again, we need to have all of that laid out. Okay, how do we transition from in class to hybrid to purely remote learning, and that's really what we're looking at as well.
So as these things get discussed, of course, if you can bring the management first to the full committee, things that need our attention and votes, I can imagine things like the calendar for, and just a small, for instance, is something the school committee does need to vote on, right? If you need to make substantive changes to the academic calendar, et cetera, make sure that we get them on our agenda.
Yep.
Should we move on to our next item? Is there more comment? So SOA, it's hard for me to get my head around how we even respond to this because we don't know if they're giving us money for these things. Has there been any update from DESE about what the expectations are for SOA?
So on my call with Commissioner Riley last week, he told us directly, do not do anything, do not submit anything, just put everything on hold for this. So I believe that they're looking at this in a way where they're probably going to have to redirect funds that they thought were going to the SOA to other places, or the SOA funds that they were projecting out based upon revenues aren't going to be there. So he has told us directly, do not do anything with it.
Okay. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It's just we need to be paying attention to it so that we don't miss a deadline.
Yes.
If
yep.
the deadline emerges. Anyone want to talk about that at all? The next item on the agenda was an advocacy update. I do have something, and then I'll open the floor. I'm going to share a document that was from the Boston School Committee. So the Boston School Committee passed a resolution in support of increased federal support and stimulus funding. So they have a lot of whereases, some of which are relevant to the school committee, our school committee. Some of them are Boston specific, but we would have, equivalencies to. They at the end, see, there's a lot of whereases. Resolve that the chairperson and members of the Boston School Committee join with the superintendent of schools in urging the mass congressional delegation, including our U.S. senators and House representatives, to advocate for and approve additional federal education funding for our nation's public schools. Do I think those will hit the president's desk and be like, oh, Wachusett said we should give them more money? I don't, but I do think that the weight of these things together, from committee after committee after committee, Senator Markey, Senator Warren, Representative McGovern will hear such things and bring it to bear. My suggestion is that if this committee is willing and someone is willing to volunteer, that I and someone else could work with the administration on, some Wachusett version we could bring to our next subcommittee meeting for a resolution. If WREA has anything too they would want to add in, I just throw that out as a possibility of something we could do.
Ken, I'd be happy to help if you want to help.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Again, I think you can see my
Yeah,
comments.
I can't. I don't always pay attention to them. So you're also working on this. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would be great.
Boston is pretty quick. Like I just heard from Sam about this. We did put out one of those take action things, and I already heard back from the 2 senators asking for COVID funding for education, Markey and Warren. But we certainly would have come to you with a request that you do a similar type statement, resolution, whatever that might be. So I probably can get you some kind of draft language quite quickly if you want to save yourself, a little time on drafting it up. Or you're welcome to write whatever. We would really appreciate that type of thing because we're going to be pushing advocacy. I'm on a statewide call tomorrow night, very hard, because just listening to this conversation, we're clearly going to need resources if we're going to open public schools with any kind of safety at all next year, even in a hybrid model. So thank you.
And as I discussed with Senator Goby at our previous meeting, there's going to be other mandates that come from the state, not bad mandates, just things we have to do. Like you can imagine temperature checks whenever certain people come in the door or what have you, that's going to probably require staffing. We're not going to ask teachers to do temperature checks, right? It's going to have to be some health professional who's going to do those kind of things. And one nurse can't do that for 2,200 kids and, however many teachers we have at the high school. So,
Well, to that point, Ken, how are you going to transport a kid home if they do have that situation, right? There's all those things that have to be taken into account.
You're probably not going to put them back on AA's bus, right? So,
right.
Yeah. So it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of costs as we talk about where the budget has to go. It's not as though our costs are going down. What I'm hearing is that both Heidi through WREA will give us some of their language. Bob's willing to help me edit that. We can present something to the full committee next meeting. And of course we can take edits from the floor at that point and see if we can propose this and send it to our federal delegation, our state delegation. They're wonderful. They're going to meet with us. It's not at their level at this moment. This is we need federal money to plug this gap. The state doesn't have money. I mean, they have some money, but they're not going to have money to do this. They can't print money. The federal government actually literally can, right? Just print money. So they're probably going to have to. Other things people want to talk about under this item. All right. Seeing none, the other things on our agenda, we have some old business, we have new business, and then we have executive session where I want to talk about strategy for negotiations with all of our collective bargaining units, actually. So is there any, before we get to executive session, is there any old business people want to take off the docket for tonight? All right, I'm not hearing any. Is there new business that we want to put on the agenda for a future meeting? All right, not seeing any. I will take a motion to enter an executive session to discuss strategy for contract negotiations with all bargaining units, SEIU Local 888, ABM Program Assistance, Teamsters Union Local, gosh, I can't read this so small, 170. Paraprofessionals, Wachusett Cafeteria Association, Wachusett Administrators Association, AFSCME Committee Council, I can't read it, 93 Local 2085 Custodial Employees, AFSCME Committee Council, 93 Local 2085 Clerical Employees, Wachusett Regional Nurses Association, Wachusett Regional Educational Association. If the chair deems the discussion in public session would have an adverse effect on the district's bargaining position, not to reconvene in public session.
So moved.
Second.
Heidi, yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye, see you later.
Bye.
So it's been moved and seconded. So we have to have a roll call vote. Once we do, we'll disconnect from Holden TV and I'll stop recording. So Member Imber.
Wait, who moved and
Sorry.
seconded? Sorry.
I moved.
I second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
And Nimber, yes.
Brown,
Brian, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Dennis,
Dennis, yes.
Roy,
Lavoy, yes.
Smith,
Smith, yes.
and Mills, yes. So we are in executive session. So Evan,
Are you still recording, Ken?
I will turn off the recording. So let me hit, once I figure out how to do that. Stop recording.
I see the record button.